In this video, I'm going to tell you the story of how I summited Pico de Orizaba, the tallest mountain in Mexico at 18,491 feet tall, despite coming down with symptoms of HAPE, High Altitude Pulmonary Edema, an acute mountain syndrome. And I'm going to talk about why I got it, why I didn't realize I had it until I started descending, and some of the risk factors of why it happened. Let's start out with why I got HAPE. First thing I'll say is I'm recovered now. You typically recover from these mountain sicknesses very quickly once you descend altitude. So the key thing is just don't raise your altitude, go down when you get these, and in most cases most people will be okay, but if you continue to go up or stay high, then you could die very quickly. But I'm feeling great now at an elevation of 60 feet. The primary reason why I got it was I spent too little time acclimating in the mountains. So I did a chart of the elevations over my trip to Mexico, where I drove to Mexico, and I went from Texas and Louisiana, which that part of Texas had almost no elevation, to central Mexico, which is over 6,000 feet of elevation, to the base of the fifth or sixth largest volcano, La Malinche, where the base camp is about 10,000 feet at the AMS resort. And then climbed that, descended, slept there, and went to the town that is right next to the volcano where Summit Orizaba was located, where I hired the guide. And that was about 9,000 feet, 8 to 9,000 feet. And then we went to the mountain, and it's really just a one-day summit. You go to the mountain during the day. Either you hike or you don't hike. It doesn't matter, because you're going to end up back at base camp typically. And then you do an alpine start somewhere between midnight and 2 a.m. for most people, but if you're really fast, maybe 4 a.m. And then you summit in the morning and then descend, and you want to get back to base camp typically before 4, so a 4x4 can pick you up because it's about a 2-hour drive, and sunset is about 6:30, and so I don't think they like to drive their 4x4s at night. You're not supposed to drive at night. So what happened was I did summit at 8, a little before 8 actually, and then I descended for 8 hours. It took me 8 hours up, 8 hours down, and we drove out about 3:34 back to Tlachichuca on January 4th. But as you can see from the chart, I was gaining over 4,000 feet of elevation for 5 days, and that's pretty risky. I climbed a lot of 14,000 feet plus mountains, but in that case I had been acclimating to the elevation for a number of weeks when I climbed most of those California 14ers. So I didn't have any altitude AMS problems for those, but I'd also done slower acclimation. But for Pico de Orizaba, I was in a rush. I had about 9-10 days of vacation set aside for this. Probably was not enough, and I had to drive 6 of those days, right? I had to drive back and forth because I was using my 4x4 vehicle to get to the camps, mostly so I could choose among gear, and it was just an easier experience than renting 4x4 rides and relying on other people's vehicles. I also did not have a firm plan to climb Pico de Orizaba. I had a firm plan to climb La Malinche, but Pico Orizaba was just more icing on the cake. I had extra days left. The weather was acceptable within that window, and that was why I tried to climb it. I was happy with La Malinche. It was actually 100 feet higher than the highest point in the continental U.S., Mount Whitney, and so it was a personal record in terms of elevation for myself, because I had climbed Mount Whitney a year or so before. So why didn't I recognize that I got acute mountain sickness and HAPE until I started descending. It's because I didn't have any of the kind of common symptoms of headache, sleeplessness, I wasn't nauseous, all those things. I was sleeping well at the camp. I was not nauseous. We were sleeping in the middle of the day, and I was able to sleep in the middle of the day. I did not feel a headache, and I did not feel fuzzy until I was being dragged up the glacier. Not literally dragged, but when we got to the glacier, we roped up. And so when we roped up, the guide just did not respect my speed. He kept on pulling on the rope, trying to get me to go faster and faster when I was at my limit. So I would have to take rest breaks every 10 seconds or to every 10 steps to catch my breath, going from 16,000 feet to 18,100 feet, right, to get to the crater rim. That was a risk factor. To push yourself beyond your limits will accelerate acute mountain sickness. And so because my guide did not respect my my abilities, my ability to go the speed that I could go, and tried to push me beyond it, that may have brought on acute mountain sickness. The other thing that, beyond the fact that I had insufficient acclimation, and also the tiredness is supposedly a sign of acute mountain sickness, but quite frankly, if you get up at 11:45 p.m. and start walking through the night, you gain thousands of feet of elevation and you're not tired, you're a Superman, so to be tired after gaining 3,000 feet of elevation seems pretty normal, and it's not outside of the bounds of what the human body reaction should be to that stress. And yes, I was short of breath, but yes, I was in high altitude, which you would expect to be out of breath in high altitude. So those aren't really symptoms that you can pin on to say, hey, there was something wrong. The other risk factor I think that happened was that I did not boil my water and I did not insulate my water in the Nalgene bottles. And so my water froze, and I was only able to open one of my two 32-ounce bottles, 1-liter bottles. So I was not taking in as much water as I would have had I took precautions, given that the wind chill was like -15 and or maybe -7 or something like that, and the actual temperature was in the single digits of Fahrenheit. And so that caused me to get my salt imbalance. So one of the things as a distance runner I'm very conscious of is the salt balance in your consumption while you're doing endurance sports, right? So if you have too little salt, that's bad. If you have too much salt, in this case I had too much salt because I was trying to eat to not bonk, to not hit the wall as it is, but I didn't have enough water to support that, and those salty snacks, sweet salty snacks, probably gave me too much salt in my system. And indeed, I think I didn't have enough saliva to eat a lot of those, or my saliva was freezing in my mouth. So that higher level of salt is a risk factor for HAPE, and it's also a risk factor for the edema that I experienced on the top of the mountain, where we have the pictures of me with a swollen face. Right, that my face was swollen, which is a rare symptom of HAPE. But I was not aware of that symptom. That's not a common symptom. I read a lot of mountaineering books, and I never had read about that. We got at top the summit rim around dawn, around 7:11 p.m., and I relaxed on the summit rim for an hour. Both the summit rim and also the summit. And I understand that's not ideal. I don't normally try to spend much time on the summit, although I'd spent a lot of time on near the summit at Malinche because I was worried about false summits. But here it was just because there was no place to rest and get in your bag and sit down on the glacier because it was so steep. The Jamapa Glacier is like really, really steep. It's like 30, 40 degrees, and it's just a struggle not to have anything slide down the glacier. I was not worried about myself sliding down the glacier with crampons on, but I was very worried about losing my bag on the glacier if when I took it off. And so and you definitely can't like sit on the glacier there, especially as you get closer to the top. And so that was why I spent so much time, is because I really, really needed the rest. Once I was up there, I refused to be roped up again because the guide refused to keep the line slack and follow my pace. Right. I'm going to talk about why I don't think that roping up is a good idea on the Jamapa Glacier beyond being driven beyond your capabilities. But I wasn't roped up on the way down, and that was a good thing, and that may have saved my life, because had I been driven beyond my capabilities going down, not only would we have slipping is much easier on the down slope, and I actually did slip several times trying to go as fast as I could to descend, but cardiovascularly I was not pushed, and I went my own pace cardiovascularly, and it was not stressful in terms of breathing and that type of thing going down. It was stressful because I'm not good at going down. I live on a flat land, and I think I just don't have the experience to go down quickly and descend quickly. But we did descend, and we did descend well before darkness, so we could drive back to Tlachichuca, where I slept at Summit Orizaba. And I noticed the wheeze. I didn't notice the wheeze until I got down below the glacier. So when I got to the bottom of the glacier after the summit, then I noticed the wheeze. And then I had a wheeze, and I had a light cough. I would get a dry cough like twice an hour or something like that. It was not overbearing yet, but it was definitely a symptom that I recognized of HAPE, and we were doing the best we could to descend. There, with the exception of the area just right next to the glacier, there's really no place for a helicopter to come. I wouldn't have known how to call a helicopter. I had a sat phone, but I think it just was like, obviously, in terms of the situation, it was much better just to walk. And, I always am of the opinion that you should always be prepared to walk out, right? That it's never an option. But, if I were dying, yes. But there was not a lot of places where you could find any support. And that's the case in most wilderness locations, that if you don't walk out, then you're probably not going to make it, right? And so I didn't have problems walking out. It was slow, but it was really the same speed as La Malinche. I'm not suited, or I'm not experienced enough walking down 30-degree slopes. And if you look at the average slope is roughly 30 degrees on Pico de Orizaba from Piedra Grande. So it's like less than 3 miles, maybe 2.5 miles as in terms of distance, according to my Garmin watch. But you're going up a mile of elevation, right? So it is almost a mile, 4,400 feet, right? So that is a very steep average slope, and down climbing on that, I don't have the muscle memory or something to down climb that super quick. All right, so I'm going to talk about some of the things that I think that you could do to make your ascent of Pico de Orizaba a little bit easier, and my thoughts on why roping up is not the best. So we just got to the Hidalgo. Hidalgo's kind of to the left of us. We don't actually go into Hidalgo, and then we make a right when you get to the dirt road, which is obviously a 4x4 road. It was like, I would definitely say, if you're renting a car, you have a 2-wheel drive vehicle, it's
not a high clearance 4x4. You don't even want to drive to Hidalgo, even though supposedly you can. That road is also pretty bad. So the farthest you really would want to drive with anything but a 4x4 or a high clearance vehicle is Zopan. But the true 4x4 track starts right after Hidalgo. All right, I'm here in front of the Augusto pellet hut, built in 1957. So we just did the drive. It was better than expected, but not good. I don't know how many people drive their own vehicles. It does look like somebody drove their own vehicle and they pitched a tent here. There's no one in the Augustin pellet hut, which sleeps 12 as opposed to like the 80 in the larger hut. So you might get, we might retreat to here if it's too noisy. But it's also kind of good to get waken up by other parties, I think, too. You don't want to leave too early or too late. Too early is not too bad. Just talked to a Russian woman who had a bad time of it. It seemed like she was also getting kind of altitude sickness cough, and she turned around at the glacier, said it was very, very, very cold. So when a Russian tells me it's cold, it makes me worried. I was just saying the 4x4 track, there's not really been any rain. There were some wet spots, but you know, who knows from the melt system. I definitely wouldn't try it to save money. Having your own vehicle here allows you to bring more gear and switch between gear, gives you some options for charging, that type of thing. But I don't think it's going to be a trend. And, you know, it's not advisable. I mean, I guess I'm used to, there's also been reports of thefts in the Piedra Grande hut. So it takes your chances, I guess. But you know, I have experience, if you've not watched this channel before, I have experience sailing a expensive piece of machinery, a sailboat, to distant shores and foreign lands, and trusting that it's going to be okay. And I often leave it and trust it'll be okay. So I'm going to trust that it's going to be okay today. I do think that where we parked, we're right next to the hut, so like everybody's going to see what's going on with the Jeep. So that's probably a really good location. If you're wondering, there's no cellular signal here, so if you don't have a sat phone, you're probably not going to get much communications out. So my Iridium Go is working though. So because my guide doesn't speak any English, they did ask me how much walking I wanted to do today, and I didn't really have a plan for walking. I'm just pleased enough to acclimate and get an early bedtime, take some pictures of notable sights. It does seem like the trail is very, very straightforward at the beginning. There might even be a switchback up there, I see. It's a concrete trail, so that's surprising. But the big debate is, do you put on the long underwear or not? I'm gonna have to walk around and think about it. Right now I've got my my overpants over my hiking pants to keep warm, but just standing still here, getting a little bit cold, and it's noon. Okay, so one of the reasons why you would want to take the Piedra Grande route is that it has a continuous source of running water, which I'm at right here. It's kind of in this, right next to this ravine. There's actually kind of a rock structure you can see, but you see the hose of the running water before that. Now, you obviously want to treat that. I walked past people's poop on the way here. Maybe it was dog poop. Probably, I think it was human poop. So you want to treat that. I recommend taking iodine tablets because you can carry so many of them, and you just pretend it's alcohol. It'll taste good. And then the So you just go to the left of the August pellet hut. That's the small yellow hut. Before you get to it, coming from the big hut. So before you get to the yellow hut, walking from the big hut to the yellow hut, you're gonna walk to this. Let me show you the water source. So, I mean, I think that's a good option, especially for people that maybe want to hike in or want to acclimatize here on the mountain, or do up and downs during the daytime, or perhaps scout the labyrinth. Right? I'm going with a guide, so I don't need to scout the labyrinth, and I doubt that scouting it would yield much, anyways. But that's a possibility. So if you want to have a more independent expedition, you can be self-sufficient on water, thankfully, if you go to the Piedra Grande base camp. As for the toilets, there weren't even pit toilets. They were just kind of shelters where people squatted, I think. So didn't seem like everybody. So I don't think they pack out the poop here. They probably periodically pick it up because it wasn't too bad. So since there are multiple vehicles coming here every day, that is a possibility if some sort of collective wants to take responsibility for that. Just behind me is the trail to the water source. It's maybe 1/10 of a mile, not that. I'm gonna just turn around so you can see where I am. I'm right by the entrance to the Piedra Grande hut. So the big hut, you just right out of the entrance, there's a little gully. You go around the gully, you go straight onto this scree slope behind me, and the first part is going to be covered in poop because people have found that to be a private place to poop. So get your water during the daytime, watch your step, treat it. And this is well before the Augustin pellet yellow hut. Okay, so we're in the caldera of the Pico de Orizaba. So if you look behind me, you can see the pyramid shadow that it's making. Oh my goodness. We left at 11:45 a.m. and we made really good time. It was okay until we got on the glacier, and then it was just oh man, it's no stopping, nowhere to sit down. So I guess we'll be able to get down. We got 300 feet more. You can see behind me that big bulge, and that's what we're gonna do. Okay, so we summited at 7:45. Oh no, 8 o'clock, something like that. After about 8 hours of climbing, that glacier was murder. We're gonna go slower down the glacier. Take our time. So I originally got a guide because I thought that would help with primarily my fears of the risk of crevasse and also sliding off the mountain. I think that in neither case, that's why you should get a guide for Orizaba. If you don't have the time to scout Orizaba, I think you probably will take too much time in the labyrinth, and then you're going to run out of time for the summit. So unless you're scouting the labyrinth on your own, I don't think you're going to find your way through it quickly enough. I think you can do it. I just don't think you'll do it quickly enough in the dark. And you need to do it in the dark if you're going to summit and get back down to Piedra Grande during the day. So I'm happy for people at Summit Orizaba who got me the guide. The other thing that helped me with the guide was that because I was driving my vehicle to Piedra Grande, my 4x4 high clearance vehicle, don't do a 2-wheel drive, don't do a low clearance 4x4. You need a really high clearance 4x4 to get there. That and you want to take off your ball, if you have one, if it's lit, anything that goes down, you want to have the highest possible clearance in addition to 4x4. So actually, I think route finding is probably the best reason to have the guide. I personally would say no to short roping. That's what they all do. Short roping probably will help you with self-arrest, but really, if you're in a group of 1 or 3 short roped, if you think that reduces your chance of sliding off the mountain, I don't think so. I think that probably having the inexperienced people on the rope are less likely to self-arrest, and having more people on the rope means that one person, say the guide, can't self-arrest, and the guy is probably going to weigh like 150 pounds, so they're just probably not going to be able to stop somebody on a slide. I didn't see any slides on the day. I also didn't see any crevasses. I saw 1-inch crevasses that we walked over, but I didn't see any like big crevasses. And you can actually look at the mountain pretty well, and unless there's snow bridges, I don't think crevasse risk is a big deal. Now, having a guide there not roped, if you fall in a crevasse, then they can rescue you, right? They'll know that you fell in, and then they have rope to rescue you. So in that sense, I think it's good. But the short roping, I don't think it does anything good, and it actually creates a lot of risks. I refused to be short roped on the way down, and I probably should have refused to do it on the way up, but because my guide did not speak any English, I didn't do that. Last 2,000 feet of elevation gain is on the Jamapa Glacier, and the Jamapa Glacier, there's really no place to stop. So you want to take a good rest and get everything in order before you get on the glacier, and eat as much as you want, drink as much as you want. You want to get a good drink, good eat, because it's really hard to get into your pack on the Jamapa Glacier, because your pack's going to slide down the glacier. So for that reason, I really think that they should have like a high camp. I think that would make it better. I'm not 100% how feasible that is, but for instance, if you could camp near the Jamapa Glacier, there's kind of a flat area near there, and I think just above the labyrinth, I think also there's a flat area, and there are water sources in the sense that you've got the glacier there. I think there's like the Jamapa River or something, but you might have kind of a lot of particulate water. So it might be better just to carry your water up, but the problem is it freezes, so you might need a stove to melt your water. So I don't know, probably if you could filter your water some way and then boil it, or treat it with iodine or chlorine or whatever, that might be possible to do a high camp. And definitely a high camp would make it a lot easier. Then you could do the hiking it during the daytime. The Jamapa Glacier is really, really cold right before dawn, and that's usually when people are getting ready to summit it, and that's what we did. We summited at 8.